Hey everyone, I hope you're all doing well. Before I get into today's video, I just wanted to circle back to my previous video where I discussed my struggles with veganism. And I wanted to say a huge thank you to all of you for the comments that you left, for watching the video, for engaging with it. I was really moved and touched by the stories that you told and the vulnerability you expressed in the comments. So thank you to all of you who shared some of those negative stories, which are hard to share and hard to talk about. Thank you for sharing them. I think it's important that we find validation within our community and with people who, feel the same way that we do. And also thank you to all of you who shared positive stories, which give us a sense of optimism and drive and determination and a sense of positivity, knowing that there are people out there who are responding positively and who are interested in the message behind veganism and also the principles and philosophy behind veganism as well. So basically, just a huge thank you to all of you for watching, sharing, engaging, and for your vulnerability in the comment section as well. I was very moved reading through all of your personal stories, which brings me to today's video, which is actually a personal story of mine, because exactly 10 years ago today, the day that I uploaded this video, that is, I came across this story, and it was about a really horrifying incident that had taken place. But through coming across this story, I really began to reevaluate so many things about my life, about animals, about eating animals, about all of these different things. And actually, this story 10 years ago today was a major catalyst, if not the biggest catalyst, in shaping the person that I am now and what I do now and the mentality I have now. And I think the reason I wanted to tell this story is because it's 10 years ago today, which is a long time really, but also because I think it's important for us to recognize how out of the blue something can happen which can change us, which can come to define us in many ways, change who we are, change how we operate, change how we think, change how we live. And I think as vegans, it's empowering to think about these moments that could come out of the blue and can fundamentally shape us as humans. I suppose it gives us inspiration and optimism to know that sometimes it can be something that we had no expectation of occurring. Sometimes it can be something that we had no anticipation for. And I suppose as advocates and as activists and as communicators and as vegans, hopefully positively inspiring other people to become vegan, it also teaches us that moments of change can lead and evolve to something bigger for people. And a conversation we have, or something we share online, or something that we do which puts this message in front of people can be a spark, an unexpected spark in their life, which can lead them on a path or a challenging of their previous mindset. It can lead them on this journey to eventually becoming a fundamentally different person in many ways. And I think there's an optimism to this, even though the story itself is truly horrifying. So basically 10 years ago today, I came across this story online. It had the headline, "Hundreds of chickens killed in M62 lorry crash." I see that headline, I think to myself, what on earth is that about? I'm just looking at the news and why are there hundreds of chickens on the M62, which is a motorway in England? Why on earth are there hundreds of chickens on this motorway? Why have they crashed? Why have they been killed? So I click on the article and I see that there's this truck that's crashed on the way to a slaughterhouse near Manchester in England. The truck is carrying about 6,500, I think it was sort of 6,800 chickens, has crashed on the way to a slaughterhouse. And hundreds of birds have been killed, about 1,500 have been killed from the crash. And then there are hundreds more, some gone into oncoming traffic. Obviously, there are hundreds with broken bones, with mutilations. They've got cuts, they've got physical harm that's been inflicted upon them. And so they're suffering, they're being crushed. Just a really, really awful, violent scene. I'm reading this story and I'm thinking, my goodness, what is happening here? And this thing happened to me, which had never happened before. I empathized with chickens. I'd spent my whole life up until this point, 20 years of my life, never empathizing with chickens, never thinking about chickens. To me, a chicken was a meal, fried chicken box meal or chicken breast cooked for dinner. That's what a chicken was. I never had considered chickens. A chicken, who are they? I'd never considered their experiences. I'd never empathized with chickens, felt guilt or sorrow, or felt bad for chickens before. And yet, this article, hundreds of chickens killed in M62 lorry crash, compelled me to do just that, because I thought, goodness, this is awful, this is terrible. These poor chickens, right? But then I was reminded that I loved KFC. Fried chicken was my favorite meal. Medium rare steak was my second favorite at that time. And in my fridge was the remains of a chicken meal. So I'm feeling sorry for chickens. In my fridge is the remains of dead chickens. But I'm feeling sorry for chickens. So how is it right that I'm feeling sorry for chickens when in my fridge are the remains of chickens? And to be honest, I ate chickens most days. Chicken was my go-to meal, my go-to animal to consume. So I was responsible for killing lots of chickens, for causing suffering to lots of chickens. But now I'm empathizing with chickens who are having suffering inflicted upon them, who have been killed on the way to a slaughterhouse. And then I'm thinking, on the way to a slaughterhouse, on the way to be killed. And isn't it fascinating how something like that, this story I'm talking about, can make the news? But these chickens were going to be killed. The death of these chickens isn't news. It's not shocking. It's not surprising. It's not something that's going to, be reported on by all the major media outlets in the UK. But because these chickens have been killed on the way to the slaughterhouse rather than in the slaughterhouse, all of a sudden is newsworthy. All of a sudden is something that people should be aware of, apparently. But that's unusual, because we're not against suffering and death to chickens, right? Because we cause it every single day. I mean, the numbers of chickens having suffering inflicted upon them, being killed in slaughterhouses, tens of billions, like 72 billion a year globally. So we're not against suffering and death to chickens, right? Because if we were, why would we pay for it every single day? These are the things that I was having to come to terms with. I mean, at that point, I still didn't know the scale of chicken farming and the scale of animal farming. But just instantly, I was forced to think about things in a way that I'd never done before. Slaughterhouses, animals being killed for me, the fridge, everything was starting to come together. So I realized that there was a problem, that my values, my actions, how I identified as a person, as a meat eater, but also as an animal lover, seemed completely contradictory to me in that moment. And I suppose that's the power of these moments, these catalysts, these sparks of change. They reveal something to us, don't they? They show us something that we'd never considered before. And that's what this story did to me. It almost, in essence, held up a mirror to me. And I'm thinking, gosh, how bad I feel for these chickens. But then here comes this mirror, and all of a sudden I'm looking at the problem, because the problem is me. The reason they're in the truck going to the slaughterhouse is because of me. So how can I feel bad for them when they are there because of me? And of course, everyone else who consumes them. And so that mirror moment, that period of self-reflection, it happens almost instantaneously. It's not that we're spending days and days contemplating and philosophizing over these things. It can just be a spark in an instant that all of a sudden these thoughts come through. It's like the blinders come off. The willful ignorance can no longer be willful. And we are forced, even if just temporarily, to reconcile these hypocrisies, these contradictions, to think them through in a way that we've never done previously, or at least not meaningfully previously. So I did that, and I thought about, am I against animal suffering? Am I against animal cruelty? Yes, of course. Tick, tick, of course I am. Who isn't? Well, just about everyone isn't, really, at least not in actuality. And again, there was that revelation, I suppose, of I say I'm against these things, but my actions show the complete opposite, right? I mean, how can I say that I'm against animal suffering and cruelty whilst perpetuating the most normalized and ubiquitous forms of animal suffering and animal cruelty on the planet? Again, that mirror, been seeing my own reflection, my own contradictions. So 10 years ago, I came across this story. That story compelled me to become vegetarian. I was still ignorant to the realities of dairy and eggs, of course. This was just a brief insight into these issues, but it was still enough to compel me to make a change, so I became vegetarian. And obviously I think about this often. I've spoken about it often at different talks that I've given. I reference it in my first book and speak about this because I think it is important for us as vegans, and any non-vegans watching as well, to reflect on these moments of change and on what they mean to us. And I think even if you are a non-vegan watching, I would be fairly confident that there has been something that's happened in your life related to animals, whether it be seeing a video, talking to a vegan, just thinking about it, maybe eating a meal and just something not being right. Maybe there was something that alerted you to the reality of who it is that you're consuming. I think that throughout our lives, we have all these little moments and they build up to something bigger. And the reason I speak about this often with vegans during vegan talks is because I think it can give us a sense of optimism when it comes to our advocacy. I think sometimes we have this burden of expectation that we place on ourselves where we say things like, I've got to turn this person vegan. It is my job to turn this person vegan. If this person isn't vegan by the time I've finished speaking with them, then I've failed. And I think that's an incredibly unhelpful way of viewing this issue. In my second book, which is called How to Argue with a Meat Eater and Win Every Time, I qualify that phrase win every time by discussing how a win for us as vegans should be just getting someone to think more positively about veganism, more favorably. Just being a little spark, just something, a comment, a question, a thought, an idea that we've just implanted in that person's head, that seed, if you like, that wasn't there before they encountered us, before they spoke with us, before that conversation arose. And I think that that's how we can be more optimistic in our activism, because the idea of turning someone vegan on the spot is hard, but the idea of implanting something, a moment, an element of doubt around the way that they have been living is a lot easier for us to achieve. And those little seeds, those little sparks that we implant within people can grow and can flourish and can lead them on a journey that, we don't really know the end destination of necessarily. And for me, that chicken truck crash story 10 years ago today was one of those moments that lit a fuse, that started a chain of events that led me to think differently about animals. And part of that journey was also not just about coming to terms with, meat, dairy, and eggs. It wasn't just about realizing that slaughterhouses are bad, but it was also about challenging more than that. And I think that's one of the powerful things about our change into veganism. We think about the transition to veganism, we think about, right, I'm going to eat, plant-based foods, and so the transition is subbing out chicken for tofu and beef for tempeh and lentils and beans and such. And we think about those kind of transitions, those more practical transitions. But there's also that kind of mentality transition, that shift in the way that we see things and view things and understand things. And I think the powerful thing for me in that whole journey, not just the chicken truck crash moment, but the whole journey that led me fundamentally to where I am now, was that it inspired me to think about this issue in a different way. As a vegan, sometimes non-vegans will ask me, is the issue intensive farming? Is the issue factory farming? And the reason why that mentality exists, or that question exists, is because they think of veganism about being against sort of the most awful forms of animal cruelty. And so in their head they go, well, if we take that out, what's the problem that still remains? But the vegan mentality is teaching us that actually the problem is that we view animals as having such little worth that the farming of them and the slaughtering of them in any way becomes morally permissible in our eyes. In essence, veganism isn't about challenging the consumption of meat, dairy, and eggs necessarily, because meat, dairy, and eggs are a symptom of the problem. The problem is the mentality that we have. The problem is that we view chickens as being so worthless that empathizing with them becomes an hilarious idea. An abstract idea, a farcical and absurd idea, which is why people laugh at us often. You care about chickens, why would you care about chickens? Well, the reason we care about chickens is because we have the ability to critically reflect on our normalized views and mentalities, and to challenge ourselves to not view chickens as being so underneath and so worthless that they don't deserve compassion or empathy. The whole thing about veganism is about viewing animals in a different way, not just about saying, hey, meat, dairy, and eggs are wrong, but saying, hey, the mentality, the view that we have of certain species of animals is the problem. And we have to challenge that to make what we do to them for meat, dairy, and eggs, and in every other arena of exploitation, automatically immoral, because we've raised these animals up to the point where we start to view them in the way they should be viewed, which is, of course, as sentient, feeling, conscious individuals who deserve moral consideration and empathy because of the sentience they possess and because of who they are as individuals. And for me, that's arguably the most groundbreaking thing about veganism. It's not eating more tofu and more green veggies, even though those things are great to do. It's about realizing that we had this whole mentality, this whole view, which was broken and warped and unsubstantiated and immoral. And veganism, ethical veganism, might I add, is the way that we can challenge that. And I think maybe a little bit off tangent, and I'll probably discuss this in later videos, I think this is one of the problems that we have as a vegan community, is getting people to connect with the ethics of it. That it isn't, veganism isn't something that's hey, like novel on social media. And it's not something that's like, hey, let's eat more plants because it's good for the planet. Yeah, let's do that. But that's not what veganism is. Veganism is an ethical position, which is why when you hear about people no longer being vegan and you hear about, ex-vegans and whatever, you have to really question the mindset that they had, the lengths that they went to be vegan, and the way that they viewed veganism. Because I think when you connect with it ethically and you have this mentality and you have this view, the idea that you would then go back to causing all this suffering and harm seems unconscionable to me. I think that what the world lacks often, especially in this regard, but in many regards, I suppose, is that sense of principle, that sense of living by principles, and not just because it sounds good or because other people are doing it, but because those are the principles we should have. Those are the values we should be having. And so the idea that we would regress backwards to principles which we've acknowledged are hideously wrong, I think that speaks to a problem relating to that lack of connection to the ethics of veganism. Anyway, as I say, I'll probably discuss this more in a different video, but I think that connection is paramount. It's not factory farming. It's not gas chambers. It's not macerations. It's not forced impregnations. They are symptoms of the problem, the most pernicious and vile and evil symptoms of the problem, sure. But the problem transcends beyond that, because even in a situation where animals aren't gassed to death, the exploitation and slaughter of them is still inherently immoral because of who we are exploiting and slaughtering. The individuals, the sentient conscious beings, who they are. I think that was a huge revelation for me. And the chicken truck crash in many ways was the catalyst for that change. Anyway, I just thought I would talk about it. It's a significant moment for me, the 10-year anniversary of something horrible, but that became important for me in my transition to who I am today. And so I wanted to share that with you. And what I would like to do now is ask you to let me know in the comments, what moment was there for you? And it could be the moment that led you to going vegan, or it could be something else, something more subtle, something that you just remember from your childhood, or something that you remember that at that moment, you knew meant something, but you hadn't necessarily processed what it meant. There was something that had happened. Maybe you saw an animal suffering, you went to a zoo, because for me, before I became vegetarian and vegan, I'd had an experience at a zoo, and I came across this bear in this kind of pen, and you were looking down on them. They were just below, and there were just these 4 kind of stone concrete walls, and this was their life. And I remember just looking down at this bear, feeling terrible, feeling guilty that I had paid to come into this zoo thinking it was going to be fun. But this bear, I just remember them being sat there, and just this sadness that they were emitting, that really shook me. And I never went to a zoo again, but I never really processed that moment at that time. I never really thought about it. Why am I feeling sad? What is it about this bear? What is it about animals? Why do I feel this way? But it was a moment nonetheless, a spark. Something had been sort of emerged, or something was emerging within me, something that I was recognizing. And even though I wasn't necessarily processing the full picture of what it represented in that moment, I knew that it was wrong. It just was wrong. Sometimes something just shakes you, doesn't it? Something you see, something you hear, something you think, it just grabs you almost. And it gives you this sort of metaphorical shake where all of a sudden the blinders fall off and you go, hang on a minute, what's going on here? And for me, that was one moment. The chicken truck crash was a bigger moment. But I'd love to know in the comments what your moments of change or moments of thinking have been. All right, guys. Thank you so much for watching. I really, really do appreciate it. And I look forward to reading all of your comments again. And as always, I look forward to seeing you all in the next video.